Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Johnson, and I want to provide you some tips and tools to help you have effective oral presentations. As a nutrition expert, we are often asked to speak on any given topic related to nutrition. This is something that I've been able to do throughout my career that I've loved every aspect. It's important to remember that public speaking can be scary, but the more you practice it, the better you become, and it's like riding a bicycle and you don't even think about it. What I would like you to learn from this particular lecture is describing the three components of an oral presentation and how to select appropriate techniques to deliver that information. Hopefully, you'll be able to develop a speech on your own, as this is one of your assignments for the week. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics requires a basic competency for all nutrition professionals on providing oral presentations. As I said, it's important for us to be the science-based evidence practitioners to communicate effectively to promote behavior changes by putting them into lay terms. One thing is as a dietitian, I've had the privilege and honor of speaking to a wide variety of people, from physicians to nurses to home health care to students, and even to my colleagues. So what I want you to do is think back to a time when you were sitting in a presentation. Maybe you've had the privilege of attending an annual conference promoted and put on by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. At that presentation, what was so remarkable that made you remember that presentation? I know for me personally, there are presentations of a wide variety that are memorable to me. First and foremost, it's important before you do your presentation to do your homework. There's nothing more aggravating to me than when I'm attending these conferences held for dietitians that people speak to me as a participant in the audience as if I am the lay public, not realizing that I'm their colleague as a dietitian. Therefore, it's important to tailor a message based off the audience. By creating meaningful titles, you can create an initial impression. You want to grab that audience, especially when you start to speak at these conferences. You're going to be potentially competing with another session or two or three or four that are simultaneously occurring. The first thing that people are going to do is look at the title of your presentation to see if it catches their eye. My presentation title for the California Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics annual conference is Fuel the Flame, and I'm hoping that people will understand and want to know more about feeding firefighters. So here's some examples. You could have a title that says Diabetic Management, or you could have a title that says Innovative Methods to Improve Diabetic Management. And even more politically correct, it would actually say Innovative Methods to Improve the Management of Diabetes. Another thing is practice makes perfect. It's important to practice your presentation so that it becomes very fluid, and also important to practice the time. If you've been allotted or if you've been paid to present for 1 hour and your presentation is only 30 minutes, that's not fair to the person who is paying you to speak for an entire hour. It is important when you do give an hour presentation to allow for some time at the end for questions. Another thing too is just remember that you never want to admit that you're nervous for public speaking, and you want to visualize yourself as being successful and having no nerves. Oftentimes, I've seen so many presenters say how nervous they are when in reality, you would have never known that they were nervous. Speaker introduction. So when we're introducing the speaker, oftentimes when you go to these conferences, they'll ask for a brief bio. You want to make sure that you're only highlighting the pertinent information. We want to weave in professional and personal experience together. So how would you be introduced if you were asked to give a talk on nutrition? I want you to pause the video and write out a brief introduction. At these conferences, you'll see that they have a presenter introduction before the speaker actually comes up. How would you want to be represented? So now let's get into the three parts of a presentation. Those are numbered differently. Sorry, it should be 1, 2, 3. The first part is introduction, the second part is the body of your presentation, and the third part is the summary. If you can recall to Speech 101, some no-nos are what not to do as a speaker. What are they? Write them out. As I was saying, one of the biggest no-nos is saying you're nervous. A second no-no is reading straight from your notes. This is when creating some type of bullet list can be helpful, just so it can jar your memory on things that you want to talk about, but that you're not tailored to reading verbatim a paragraph. What do we do in the introduction? The introduction is how does this message relate to or why it's important. It's important to grab that audience's attention in the first couple minutes of your presentation. You can do this several ways by providing data to support. I always like to use this in my classes for nutrition. It's the obesity rates that increase by the CDC every 5 years, and the red represents about 33 or 30% of the population being obese, whereas the light blue is less than 10%. So this can show some data to get them to understand the importance of the obesity epidemic during these years from 1990 to 2010. We can also highlight and let them know where we're going, and this is an important part, and this is something that I tend to struggle with when I'm presenting, is giving them the objectives. This is important because then they understand what to look for when you're presenting. We can also introduce with some sort of video or fun fact, or humor is another great way to get people's attention. Again, be authentic. If you're not someone who cracks jokes all the time, or if you're not sarcastic all the time, don't try to be that person, because you can tell when people are trying too hard. Now, the body of the presentation should have the bulk of the information. This is a couple different ways we can go about it, and you've previously learned about that during the nutrition approaches. We can go from general to specific, and this really helps lay the foundation, for example, talking about obesity. So what's the general problem? Americans tend to have a high rate of obesity, to more specifically how nutrition relates to that. Relating it to prior knowledge is another key aspect as well, that we can help build more of that brain pathway for them to be able to understand our material better. We want to make sure that we end on time to allow for questions. Now, the body of your presentation shouldn't be too overwhelming, and ideally, you're going to hit 3 main topics on your given presentation. Now, within those 3 topics, they could be a bit more broad, so you can go in and do a more deep dive, detailed information, but we want to make sure that it's very clear and concise, and it meets the objectives of what we want our audience to know about our particular topic. For example, when I'm talking about fueling the flame, I want them to understand what are the health concerns related to nutrition in firefighters, what are current things that we know in the scientific literature regarding nutrition in firefighters, and then future moving forward, what do we as dietitians and the nutrition fields need to be doing and understanding more of. So those are 3 key things where I've gone from general to specific, or I can even go from past, present, and future. The last part of your presentation should remind them of what you covered, and this can be a brief highlight saying, in summary, today this presentation has talked to you about effective oral presentations that include 3 key parts. 1, the introduction, 2, the body, and then 3, the summary. These 3 parts make the oral presentation effective, and there are different ways you can go about it. We want to be proactive about addressing questions as well and developing that time in our presentation to allow for those questions. As always, we want to use those key Speech 101 techniques that we learned when we're delivering oral presentations, and I cannot wait to see you all presenting one day at a conference that I attend.